Today I'm reacting to a lecture by Muhammed Ali, the Muslim Lantern, on Jinn, possession, black magic, the evil eye, and how Muslims can supposedly protect themselves from unseen forces. Unlike many videos on this topic, I actually think this lecture is one of the more thoughtful presentations you'll find. The speaker repeatedly warns Muslims not to blame everything on Jinn. He criticizes fake healers who invent rituals like sprinkling salt around the house, hanging amulets, accusing relatives of black magic without evidence, or ignoring genuine psychological illnesses. He even tells viewers that bipolar disorder and other mental illnesses are real, and that people should be careful not to confuse them with possession. So I want to give him credit for that. At the same time, he argues that jinn are real, that they can possess people, whisper to them, enter homes when Allah's name is not mentioned, contribute to family conflict, cause nightmares, influence children, and in some cases even cause physical illness. His solution is to protect yourself by praying regularly, reciting Quranic verses, making specific supplications, saying Bismillah before entering your home or eating, and performing Ruqyah according to the Quran and Sunnah. He even shares the story of a woman who says her daughter was tormented by an unseen entity until she called upon Allah, after which the torment stopped and she eventually accepted Islam. That is the basic message of the lecture. Now here's where I think we fundamentally disagree. The question is not whether strange and frightening experiences happen. They absolutely do. The question is whether jinn is actually the best explanation. When I was a Muslim, I was terrified of jinn. I remember experiencing sleep paralysis, where I woke up unable to move. I felt what seemed like an evil presence sitting on my chest. It was one of the most frightening experiences of my life. At the time, I naturally interpreted it through the Islamic worldview. I thought perhaps this was a jinn or a demon. Today, I don't think the experience was any less real. I simply think my explanation changed. Modern sleep medicine has extensively studied sleep paralysis. It can involve temporary paralysis, vivid hallucinations, a sense presence in the room, intense fear, and the feeling of pressure on the chest. Different cultures have interpreted this same experience as demons, ghosts, witches, spirits, the old hag, or jinn. The experience is real. The interpretation depends on the culture. And I think that's the pattern throughout this entire discussion. Throughout history, people have displayed bizarre behavior. Some scream, some convulse, some hear voices, some develop different personalities, some become violent, some experience terrifying hallucinations. Today we study schizophrenia, dissociative disorders, psychogenic seizures, trauma, neurological disorders, sleep disorders, and dozens of other conditions that simply were not understood 14 centuries ago. In 7th century Arabia, there was no neuroscience, there was no psychiatry, there were no MRI machines, there were no EEGs. There was no understanding of REM sleep, there was no modern psychology. If someone behaved in a way that seemed completely outside ordinary human experience, attributing it to an unseen spirit was an understandable explanation for that time. But we don't live in the 7th century anymore. Today we possess an enormous body of scientific knowledge about how the brain works. Many behaviors that once appeared supernatural now have well-established psychological or neurological explanations. Now, someone might object and say, we rule out psychological causes first. Only after that do we conclude it's jinn. But I don't think that solves the problem. Suppose we rule out schizophrenia. Suppose we rule out bipolar disorder. Suppose we rule out epilepsy. Suppose we rule out every diagnosis we currently know. Does that automatically prove jinn? Of course not. Not knowing the explanation is not the same thing as proving your preferred explanation. If doctors cannot identify the cause of a mysterious illness, we don't conclude that aliens did it. We simply admit that we don't know yet. I don't know is a perfectly reasonable answer. What I find particularly interesting is the reaction to the Quran during so-called possessions. Muslims often present this as powerful evidence. The person screams when the Quran is recited. They become distressed. They shake. They may even speak differently. But think about the psychology involved. If someone sincerely believes that an evil jinn inside them hates the Quran, then hearing the Quran becomes one of the most emotionally charged experiences imaginable. Fear, expectation, suggestion, trauma, and intense religious belief can all produce dramatic psychological reactions. None of that requires an invisible supernatural being. And notice something else. Very similar possession experiences occur in many religions. Christians perform exorcisms. Hindus perform exorcisms. Traditional religions all over the world perform exorcisms. People scream. People convulse. People speak strangely. Each religion concludes that its own invisible beings are responsible. The experience remains remarkably similar. Only the interpretation changes. The same applies to the conversion story in this lecture. I have no reason to accuse a woman of lying. She may sincerely believe everything that she experienced. But sincere experiences do not tell us which religion is true. Christians report miraculous healings. Hindus report miraculous healings. People claim to be healed by shamans, saints, temples, and sacred objects. If unusual experiences occur across contradictory religions, then the experiences themselves cannot tell us which religion is correct. The explanation still has to be demonstrated. And this leads me to what I think is the deeper issue. Everything supernatural in Islam is invisible. Gabriel is invisible, Jinn are invisible. Angels are invisible, Shaitan is invisible. Heaven is invisible, hell is invisible. The night journey happened outside public observation. The conversations between Muhammad and Gabriel were private. The instructions about Jinn all come from revelation. In fact, nearly every detailed supernatural claim in Islam ultimately depends on accepting Muhammad's testimony about an unseen world that nobody else could independently verify. Think about that. The creator of the entire universe supposedly revealed the final instructions for all of humanity through one individual, who claimed to speak on behalf of an invisible God, through an invisible angel about invisible beings that no one else could independently examine. To me, that should give us pause, because if someone made those same claims today, we would naturally ask for independent evidence before believing them. I don't deny that people have terrifying experiences. I don't deny that people experience things they cannot immediately explain. What I reject is the leap from, I don't know what happened, to, therefore it was a jinn. For me, the burden of proof has never been met, and until we have independent, publicly verifiable evidence that invisible beings are actually interacting with our world, I think psychology and neuroscience provide a far better explanation than an unseen world that depends entirely on accepting one man's testimony. That is why I no longer believe in Jinn, not because frightening experiences are not real, but because I no longer think Jinn is the best explanation for them.